lesson 25, which will be in part half of the next presentation. 25 and 26 will go as a set. What I'm going to do in 26 is literally make some Christmas ornaments that look sort of like these. Now I know that's maybe not the way you make them, but this is the way I do it. In order to do that, we have to take a piece of wood, shape it, and hollow it. I generally just use pieces of junk wood that have come. This is maple, this is redwood burl. But to hollow this out requires a special tool. And we have made tools in the past, some that look sort of like this. While it'll fit through the hole, the blade is way too long and will start to airplane in your hand and not work. So we're going to make a custom tool for this job. So this lesson is all focused on that tool making activity. So what I have done is gotten into my selection of Allen wrenches, which I'm sure everybody has a drawer like this full of a whole bunch. And I selected out some Allen wrenches from which I'm going to make the tool. Well, these are 1/4 inch wrenches. This one's way too long. I'd have to cut it off and waste some. Nothing wrong with using these 1/4 inch, but I have chosen for this project to use one that's a 3/16 wrench. And at the end of today's lesson, what we're going to do is produce this tool. Mount it into a handle, like that. I've already turned handles, so you've seen how that's been done in much earlier lessons. So we're not going to do that. The handle is just a given. So this is a 3/16 Allen wrench, which we're going to modify. So today's lesson, all about making tools. So let's get started. Kind of straightened up a little bit. And I want to talk to you about why this particular shape. 2 reasons. One, the cutting edge of this tool is in line with the handle, which means when it's inside, it's not going to torque over, so that it's going to stay right where your hand is. Second thing, the depth of this curve, when I go into the hole, is going to establish how deep I can make that cut. So from the outside, it says that that cut will go down to about there. I'm not interested in making this really nice inside. I'm simply interested in reducing the weight so that this doesn't hang heavily on the branch of a Christmas tree. So I've made the curve such that when I do this and it bottoms out, I've gone as far as I need to go. So the curves are always going to vary a little bit. So to make this, what I need is a pair of vice grips to hold it. I'm going to use a couple of files in a few minutes to make sure the shaft is round rather than hexagonal, because as it goes into the hole, I don't want these corners dragging and cutting the wood into a larger hole than I planned for. And a torch and a vise. The torch is going to heat up the metal. I'm going to grab it with these vice grips and stick it into the jaws of the vise and actually make my first bend. And that is simply to take this 3/16 Allen wrench here and straighten it out. And then I'll show you the next step. So let's get started right now. Glasses, safety. I'm going to grab this in my Allen wrench in the vice grip jaws. That's so I don't burn my fingers. I'm going to heat this curve right here. Come out here and literally straighten that out. So I've kind of set the vise such that it'll probably straighten it out. So let's fire up the torch. I know you can't hear me, so I won't talk. I'm just heating that corner. Got it? Here. Straighten it. Use the vise to straighten it some more. And that's about as straight as I can get it. And that's good enough for what I need to do the next step. So I'm going to go to the lathe, grab this end in a 4-jaw chuck, and file this portion here down until it's round, but not until after it cools down a little bit. So I'm going to breathe on this thing for a while, cool it, and then meet you at the lathe. I'm over at the lathe because my next operation is to make this shaft round. So I've got a 4-jaw chuck on here with what I call number 1 jaws, and it'll hold a 3/16 rod. And all I'm going to put in here is what will go into the handle. The rest of this I want to file. So that's tight. I'm using 2 files, a flat bastard file, which is a fairly coarse file, and then after I get it roughly around, I'm going to go to what's called a mill bastard file, which is a little finer cut. But before I started, I came in here with a toothbrush, brass brush also works, and I cleaned the files to get as much debris accumulated out of the teeth as I can. So that's done. I'm ready to go. Let's turn on the lathe and see what we've got. It's running pretty straight. There's a little bit of wobble here where I bent it, but that'll be okay because I'm going to bend it some more in a few more minutes. So I picked it up just about 1,000 RPM, and my job now is file this until it's round. And this is going to take a couple minutes. I have put paper towels here to protect the ways of the lathe from any metal filings that land here. So this is another opportunity for fast forward. Well, the corners are knocked down, but they're not off yet, so I've still got some more filing to do. Pick up the speed just a little bit. It's awfully close to being round. Down here a little bit more, and on the very tip a little bit more. That's pretty doggone close, and if you can see on the ways of the lathe, on the paper towel, there's a lot of metal filings accumulated, and we just don't want to get that on the lathe. When I get down here, I'm going to pick that towel up, fold it, throw it in the trash. So I think I'll go to a finer grit. This is where I'm going to go to the standard mill bastard file. And all that file is doing is making just a little bit smoother. There's a few spots on here, but it doesn't really matter. I've got it roughly round. I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper, maybe about 180 grit, and try to clean it up just a bit more. So let me get that and I'll be right back. This is just to make it look nicer. Once I've done this, got to throw this piece of paper away. This is no good for wood anymore. But the aluminum oxide that we use on wood works just fine on metal. What makes this a little difficult to do is this has been hardened, so it takes a little bit of effort to grind this round. So it looks kind of nice. When I go through the next couple of steps, it's not going to end up looking quite that nice. So what we have is a part that's going to go down into the handle. I left that hexagonal so it'll lock into the wood handle. And I've rounded all this down. And now we're going to put some shape into it. So back to the torch and the vise. We're back at the workbench again. Took a couple minutes to do that filing, so now I'm going to put my first bend in. So I'm going to grab it this way. The first bend I'm going to make is to just take this shaft and bend it about 45 degrees this way. And then I want that to cool, because I don't want that to move again. And then I'm going to reheat it and pull this portion in. There's an edge ground on here, but I'm not going to do that until the very end, because I'm not quite sure where the shape of the shaft is going to come out. I'll add my cutting edge at the end. So now I'm going to heat it right about here and bend it 45 degrees. Forty-five degrees coming up. Okay, there's the first curve. Now I'm going to let it cool, because I now want to bend it here, and I don't want this portion here to be moving. So I've got to let it cool, reheat it, pull the rest of the curve in. Okay, I'm going to breathe on it for a while, takes a minute or two, and we'll come back and do the torch process again. That's pretty cool. It's time to go on. So here's where we are, right there. So about this area right here, I'm going to heat and put it in the vise and bend it back into that curve. So the key now is to heat it all this area in here. So here we go one more time. Okay, let's see how the bend goes. Into the vise. There's the working tip. I'm going to come back around and create my curve. And I'm going to move it so I can curve it a little bit more. That looks pretty good, actually. Just a smidge more. There's our tool. Well, not quite a tool, but we're almost there. So I'm going to cool it again, and then we're going to go to the grinder and we're going to shape the tip. This needs to be rounded, and a cutting surface needs to be added, and the back edge needs to be slightly relieved. So while this is cooling, let me talk to you about the torch I'm using. This is a MAP gas torch. You can buy that at any hardware store. I particularly like the auto lighting features, as you can see how fast and easy that is. LP gas works equally well. You do not need the extra heat of the MAP gas, but I prefer it because it works just a little bit faster. And for larger metal products, where I have to transfer a lot more heat to do whatever metal working I need to do, I do need the extra amount of heat that can come out of it. So from here, we're going to go all the way to the other end of the studio, go up to the grinder, and using with the aluminum oxide wheel, we are going to shape the tip of this. Not the CBN wheels. This is carbon steel. And I don't want to put this onto the CBN wheels, but I will do all the work at the aluminum oxide. keeping it right here. For that matter, we could just move up there and go to work right now. See you in the other end of the room. We're at the grinders, and I've got a really good grip on this with my vice grip. Excuse me, my vice grips. And what I'm going to do is come down here, and I'm simply going to radius this all the way around. So I'm going to use the platform and the aluminum oxide wheel and simply create a curve like the shape of my finger on the very end of this. And that's all I'm going to do. After that's done, I'll come up to the side of the wheel and I'm going to put a flat here, which will be the cutting edge. I did this last because I wasn't quite sure how this curve was going to come out until after I had it bent. Now I know where that edge needs to go. So now I'm going to go to the grinder and I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to very carefully grind that curve into it so it'll look like the tip of my finger when we get done, sort of like that. So good grip here. Make sure the platform is very close to the wheel. We don't want to risk this being able to wedge down in there. And we're ready to go. Up to speed. So I've got a radius on the tip. That is sound of me banging these vice grips into the platform. Shouldn't have done it, but it doesn't matter. Now I'm going to tilt it up just a little bit and do that same activity again. What I'm now doing is creating a back bevel on this tool. So now it looks like that. It's rounded, there's a back bevel on it, and now all I need to do is to put the cutting edge on, which has to be done on this side. This is going to be the cutting edge right here. I want about half of this thickness to go away. Now, I'm also not going to cut it square across. I'm going to slightly cant it, just a couple of degrees, so it's more of a shearing cut inside the wood than it will be just a straight flat scraping. So instead of coming in like this, I'm going to slightly bring the tool over a little bit to my left while I grind this. I'm getting there, but I got more to go. It'll go farther. That's looking pretty good. But I'm going to go back and touch up that back bevel again a little bit. Just a little bit. Just kind of get rid of some burrs. Clean off the burrs again. And one more step to go. I'm going to harden this back at the workbench. One of the last steps. This is fairly soft metal now because I've been heating it and relaxing the crystalline structure by allowing it to cool slowly. I want to heat it back up to cherry red. Test it with my magnet for a lack of magnetic characteristics. I'll figure out how to say it later. And once it's reached that point and it's no longer magnetic, I'm going to plunge it into the oil. This is peanut oil, just plain old peanut oil. Doesn't smell bad, doesn't flame up much, and it was inexpensive at the grocery store. So I'm going to heat it cherry red, test it to see if it's magnetic. As soon as that's gone, I'm going to plunge it, and we will then have hardened the tip on the thing so it'll hold an edge much better. So here we go. So I've got it in the peanut oil as quick as I could. Swirl it around so that I can cool it as fast as possible. Heating it up changes the crystalline structure of the steel to something that's much harder. And what I want to do is freeze that state. So once I've raised it, tested it for magnetic characteristics, then I try to freeze that crystalline structure by doing this. So that's now cleaned. It's a little dirty looking, and it's dirty looking because it's got oil on it, for one. And it's got some black on the surface, and the black is carbon that has been driven out of the steel in that heat treating process. So what I would now do is polish that up a little bit. Mount it in a handle that we've already made. Little epoxy in there will do that just fine. And you know how to make handles, so I don't need to show you that. But I do want to touch the edge up right before we quit, because sharp as possible is a good thing. So a little hand honing, and we'll see you in the next lesson where we actually make the ornaments using this tool. See you later.